Welcome to True Echo, where powerful stories reveal hidden truths and inspire change. Tonight's story is one of dignity, quiet strength, and ultimate justice. When a successful black woman CEO walks into her own luxury hotel and is humiliated by her staff, no one realizes the woman they're mocking owns the very place they work for. But what she does next? It doesn't just change lives, it shakes the entire system. Stay with us. Melissa Warren stood across the street from the towering glass structure she had helped design over a decade ago, the Fairline Hotel in Charleston, South Carolina. A monument of luxury and prestige, it gleamed beneath the streetlights, proudly displaying the very elegance she had once envisioned. Yet tonight, she wasn't walking in as the celebrated CEO of Rowan Hospitality. She wore no designer labels, no security entourage. Just a simple hoodie, jeans, and worn sneakers. She looked like any ordinary traveler. And that was the point. Melissa took a slow, deliberate breath before crossing the street. She wasn't here to be recognized. She was here to test something, to face a lingering suspicion that beneath the Fairline's polished perfection, something had gone terribly wrong. As the automatic doors slid open, a cool waft of air greeted her, accompanied by the soft notes of live jazz drifting from the lobby speakers. Inside, everything was pristine. Marble floors gleamed under warm lighting. Velvet sofas in rich navy blue were arranged just as she remembered approving in the early renderings. But the warmth of the room didn't reach the reception desk. There, behind a polished wood counter, stood a sharply dressed young man whose cold expression pierced through the refined atmosphere like a knife. Melissa approached slowly, deliberately. "Good evening," she said softly. "I have a suite reservation. My name is Melissa Warren." The young man barely looked up. "Name again?" he asked, his voice clipped with disinterest. "Melissa Warren," she repeated, her tone calm. He typed quickly, glanced at the screen, then frowned with manufactured annoyance. "Sorry, no reservation under that name. Are you sure it's for tonight?" Melissa offered a subtle smile. "Could you check under Rowan Hospitality Group? Suite 1701. At the mention of 1701, his eyes narrowed. "That suite is reserved for corporate VIPs, he said, his tone now dipped in subtle contempt. "Senior executives only." Melissa nodded slowly. "That's the policy I put in place." His brows knit. "Excuse me?" "I'm the CEO of Rowan Hospitality," she said, without any change in tone or posture. "That suite is mine." The young man let out a dry laugh. Loud enough for nearby guests to hear. "You're the CEO?" He pressed a discreet button beneath the desk. "We've had guests pretend to be owners before. Security will be here in a moment." Melissa said nothing. She simply stood there, letting the silence stretch. When Tom Reynolds, a burly security guard, approached and positioned himself beside her like she was a threat, Melissa didn't flinch. She'd expected this. It was all part of the reason she'd come. From the side hallway, a pair of sharp heels clicked like a metronome across the marble floor. Linda Foster, the Fairline's night manager, emerged, her golden hair twisted into a tight bun, her designer suit pristine. Her face was a mask of polite dismissal as she eyed Melissa like a misplaced object. "What's going on here?" Linda asked Dylan, the clerk. "She claims she's the CEO," Dylan said, almost smirking. "No reservation, but insists she has rights to suite 1701. Linda turned to Melissa. "I'm Linda Foster, night manager. Please show me identification." Melissa quietly offered both a driver's license and a Rowan Hospitality business card. Linda glanced at them without really looking, then returned them coldly. "You don't look like a CEO," she said with a tight smile. "We'll need more time to verify your claim. Please step aside while we investigate." "I will stand right here," Melissa replied calmly. "What matters isn't my title. It's how your staff treats people who walk through those doors." A flicker of unease passed across Linda's face, but she turned and retreated back into the office. Tom's stance remained rigid, arms folded. Beside Melissa, his looming frame was designed to intimidate. Across the room, Dylan returned to assisting a wealthy white couple, his demeanor transforming completely, smiling, attentive, warm. Melissa watched in silence. To them, she realized, respect was conditional. And appearances dictated value. From the corner, a quiet mop glided across the marble. Loretta Davis, a longtime housekeeper, had watched it all unfold. Slender, silver-haired, and stoic, she missed nothing. As she worked her way closer to Melissa, she whispered just loud enough for her to hear. "Just stay there. They're digging their own grave." Melissa looked at Loretta, a silent bond forming between two women who had survived too many quiet indignities. Melissa gave a slight nod. That small act of solidarity gave her renewed strength. She reached into her hoodie pocket and pulled out her phone. With deliberate calm, she dialed. "This is Melissa Warren," she said quietly. "Activating the Charleston Protocol." The air shifted instantly. The moment Melissa spoke those 5 words, "activating the Charleston Protocol," a ripple moved through the hotel lobby like a silent explosion. Dylan's hands froze mid-keystroke. Tom Reynolds' brow furrowed deeply. Even the background music felt like it dimmed beneath the pressure of what had just been said. The Charleston Protocol was known only to a select few within Rowan Hospitality. It was a private audit sequence designed by Melissa herself, a mechanism triggered in secret, intended to test not just hospitality standards, but core values. Only the CEO had the authority to activate it, and only when she believed a hotel was failing at its most critical duty, respecting the dignity of every person who walked through its doors. Melissa slipped her phone back into her pocket with the kind of quiet control that made every glance toward her feel like a mistake being realized too late. She didn't speak again. She didn't need to. The atmosphere now throbbed with unspoken tension. Dylan, suddenly panicked, began scanning his computer screen again, this time searching for anything that might validate or invalidate the words he'd just heard. But there was no trace of the Charleston Protocol in the guest system. That authority lay far above his pay grade, and that fact alone turned his internal panic into visible fear. "What's the Charleston Protocol?" he asked, failing to keep his voice steady. Melissa didn't respond. Instead, she turned her gaze toward Tom Reynolds, whose military-cut jaw was now tense with confusion. Tom had spent years handling high-stakes situations, but tonight, something felt off. This wasn't a normal incident. His instincts screamed it. Before anyone could speak further, the glass doors of the hotel slid open again. 2 men entered. They were dressed in understated dark suits, no name tags, no fuss, just quiet power. William Langston, Vice President of Internal Operations, and Julian Barrett, Head of Corporate Ethics at Rowan Hospitality. They moved with the certainty of men on a mission, their eyes sweeping the lobby with analytical precision. Dylan's face drained of all color. "Oh, my God," he whispered. Linda Foster emerged from the back office just as the 2 men stepped forward. "Mr. Langston," she began, her voice attempting calm, This is a small misunderstanding. We've got it under control." "Is that so?" William Langston's voice was sharp but quiet, like the sound of a blade being drawn. "Because according to our emergency alert system, the Charleston Protocol was activated from this location." He turned to Melissa. "Ms. Warren. We received your signal and arrived as instructed." The revelation struck the staff like thunder. Melissa nodded once, then took a single step back, allowing William and Julian to move forward. The room fell dead silent as Julian pulled out a sleek black tablet and opened an internal memo. "The Fairline Hotel," he read aloud, "was informed 3 weeks ago via encrypted email that a confidential executive review would take place, conducted by a senior officer arriving unannounced. Staff were instructed to provide top-tier hospitality to all guests regardless of appearance, attire, or check-in status. Dylan Evans, did you receive this memo? Dylan stammered. I don't remember. William raised an eyebrow. That's unfortunate. It was marked with your name, your login ID, and your acknowledgement timestamp. You opened it. You just didn't read it. Dylan's knees weakened. He stumbled back a step, his confident persona unraveling. Linda's voice, usually so composed, cracked. We were never told who the executive would be. She didn't look, she caught herself. She didn't identify herself clearly. Julian didn't even blink. She didn't have to. That's the point of an unannounced inspection. What we witnessed here is a failure of basic humanity, not protocol. Behind the desk, Tom Reynolds shifted uncomfortably. Though he hadn't spoken a word, his quiet intimidation of Melissa now stood out in stark contrast to his silence before the executives. He wasn't just a guard anymore, he was part of the problem. Then, from the far corner of the lobby, came another voice. Young, nervous, but trembling with courage. I recorded the whole thing, Pamela Adams said. Every head in the room turned. Pamela Adams, the quiet intern barely a month into her role at the Fair Line, stood near the grand piano in the lobby. Her hands trembled as she clutched her phone to her chest, but her eyes, those carried something stronger, truth. Determination. Justice. I have video proof, she said again, louder now. Of everything. From the moment Melissa walked in, to Dylan calling her a liar, to Linda dismissing her ID like it meant nothing. Dylan's mouth opened, but no sound emerged. Linda turned pale, her perfectly painted face suddenly ghost-like. Even Tom's tall, muscular frame looked as if it had been punctured by a pin, his posture slouched ever so slightly, the weight of consequence beginning to crush him. Julian Barrett extended a hand. Please bring that to me, Ms. Adams. Pamela hesitated only a moment before crossing the lobby, her legs wobbling but her purpose clear. She handed Julian her phone. He tapped play. The room went still. Dylan's sneer. Linda's smug expression. Tom's looming figure treating Melissa like a threat. All of it played back in perfect clarity. The sound was unmistakable. Every icy word. Every dismissal. Even Loretta's quiet voice whispering her encouragement to Melissa. Julian didn't react immediately. He simply handed the phone to William Langston without saying a word. William's expression darkened with each passing second. Linda Foster, he said at last, his voice calm and even, but more dangerous than shouting. You are suspended effective immediately pending a full investigation. Your failure to uphold this company's core values is no longer a matter of suspicion. It is documented fact. Linda gasped. Wait, no, this isn't fair. It's more than fair, William interrupted. It's overdue. He turned to Dylan, whose face had gone beet red, sweat forming along his hairline. Mr. Evans, you may hand over your keycard now. Your services are no longer required. Dylan's voice cracked. Please, I was just doing what I thought was right. I didn't know. Melissa finally stepped forward, eyes steady, voice calm. You knew exactly what you were doing, Dylan. You made a choice. Not out of confusion. Out of prejudice. The words landed like a verdict. Dylan looked down. For the first time, truly ashamed. William addressed the room. What happened here tonight is not just a violation of Rowan hospitality standards. It is a betrayal of basic human decency. That betrayal was met with silence by some, but also with courage by others. He turned to Pamela. Pamela Adams, your bravery has not gone unnoticed. Rowan Hospitality is offering you a permanent position, effective immediately, as Special Assistant to the Vice President of Customer Service and Compliance. Pamela's eyes widened, tears springing instantly to the corners. I was afraid, she whispered. William nodded. That's what makes it brave. From her corner, Loretta Davis, the quiet housekeeper who'd watched injustice from the shadows for years, smiled through misty eyes. Pamela caught her gaze and smiled back. In that shared glance was a legacy of strength, passed down, honored, protected. Tom Reynolds remained silent. He stepped forward and laid his security badge on the front desk, not waiting to be asked. "I failed to do what was right," he said softly. "And that has consequences." Melissa met his eyes and gave a faint nod. Acknowledging the courage in owning his failure, but not absolving it. In the heavy silence that followed, it was Loretta who finally broke the stillness. She stepped forward, mop in hand, as she always had, but tonight, her presence felt regal. "I've seen this hotel shine," she said quietly, her voice steady, "and I've seen it rot. But tonight, something changed. Because someone stood her ground. And someone else, finally saw her." Melissa turned toward her. "No. Not just someone. We saw each other." They held the gaze. Two women from vastly different worlds. Bound by the same fire. And across the lobby, staff members watched, not in shock, but in reflection. The ground had shifted. Fairline would never be the same again. The lobby's energy, once thick with disdain and false superiority, now pulsed with revelation. Staff members stood silently, processing the collapse of what they thought they knew. For some, it was shame. For others, awe. And for a rare few, it was inspiration. Melissa Warren stood at the center, not as a woman seeking revenge, but as a leader forcing a reckoning. She turned slowly, facing the gathered employees who had begun trickling in from the back offices, kitchens, and hallways, drawn by the commotion and rumors that now buzzed like electricity. Her voice, when she spoke, was not raised. Yet it carried through the grand lobby like a hymn. There is no luxury more valuable than respect. And there is no lie more dangerous than the one that tells you some people deserve more dignity than others. No one dared move. "I didn't come here tonight to fire anyone," she continued, letting her gaze rest on each and every staff member. "But I did come to see who we've become, and what this hotel stands for when no one is watching." She stepped toward the reception desk, gently resting her hand where Dylan had so arrogantly dismissed her hours ago. "I built the Fairline to represent excellence, not just in hospitality, but in humanity. We've failed." She looked toward Loretta again. "But we can rebuild." A few staff members lowered their heads in agreement. Some had stood by doing nothing. Others had participated directly in the quiet cruelty. But in Melissa's words, they now saw a mirror, and the reflection wasn't one they could live with any longer. Pamela stood quietly to the side, holding the phone that had captured the truth. She looked uncertain, as if her very presence still felt out of place in such a momentous gathering. Melissa turned to her, lifting her voice slightly. "You didn't stay silent. And because of that, real change can begin here." Pamela looked down, humbled. Then Melissa turned toward Loretta again. "And you, Loretta, you've kept this place running with grace for decades. You've seen more than anyone. Your voice will now be part of leadership." Loretta's eyes widened. "Miss Warren. I clean floors." Melissa smiled. "And now you'll help clean the culture. I want you on the Staff Ethics Council. Starting tomorrow." The lobby murmured. Julian Barrett stepped forward to reinforce the message. "This hotel has new standards now. And every one of you will be trained, evaluated, and expected to uphold them, no matter your rank, role, or years of experience." Melissa gave a small nod. "There are no more invisible people here." Then came the sound that had been missing all night, a slow, steady clap. It began with Harold Mitchell. The elderly man who had once been turned away from this very hotel 2 decades earlier, now applauding not out of celebration, but from deep, solemn respect. Others followed. First a few scattered hands. Then the applause grew. Not roaring. Not wild. But sincere. Unshakable. Transformational. Melissa lowered her eyes for a moment. For the first time all night, she felt the full weight of what she'd just done, not just exposing injustice, but lighting a fuse that could burn through years of quiet prejudice. She looked up, her voice calm again. "This was never about me," she said. "It was about all of us. About how we treat the people who walk through our doors, and the people who work behind them." She paused. "So let this be the last night someone is dismissed, mocked, or erased at fair line. Starting now, we honor every voice." The crowd stood in silence once more. But this time, the silence was sacred. Not oppressive. Sacred. The morning after the longest night in Fairline Hotel's history, the conference room on the top floor was filled wall to wall with employees, everyone from housekeepers and bellhops to junior managers and kitchen staff. No one had called in sick. No one dared. Melissa Warren stood at the front of the room, dressed now in a crisp charcoal blazer and silk blouse. Her presence was unmistakable, calm, measured, but utterly commanding. Gone was the hoodie-clad guest from the night before. In her place stood the woman who owned this building, this brand, and the future everyone now hoped to remain part of. Julian Barrett and William Langston flanked her, both stone-faced and alert. A thick silence hung in the air, not of resistance, but of reckoning. "I won't waste your time with pleasantries," Melissa began. "What happened last night wasn't an isolated incident. It was a symptom of a deeper sickness. One I have ignored for far too long." No one moved. Even the air conditioning seemed to hush itself. "I built Rowan Hospitality with the belief that luxury and respect could coexist, that it wasn't about gold chandeliers or silk sheets, but how people are treated when no one's watching. But somewhere along the way, many of you forgot that." She paused, letting her words settle into the quiet. Dylan Evans forgot. Linda Foster forgot. And sadly, many of you stood by and watched it happen. Some employees dropped their eyes. Others nodded, solemnly. "But not everyone failed," Melissa said, her tone softening. "Some of you stood tall when it mattered most." She turned toward Pamela, who sat near the back of the room, still unsure if she belonged here despite her courage. "Pamela Adams," Melissa said clearly, "displayed the kind of integrity that this company will now be built upon. Effective immediately, she is promoted to Special Assistant for Customer Service, Quality and Compliance." A ripple of surprise flowed through the room. Pamela gasped, placing a hand over her heart. What?" she whispered aloud. Melissa smiled. "You spoke truth to power. Now you'll help ensure that truth becomes policy." The staff erupted into applause. This time, it wasn't hesitant. It was genuine. Melissa raised her hand for quiet and continued. "There's one more person I want to recognize," she said, eyes scanning the room until they fell on a familiar figure, slight in frame but mighty in soul. "Loretta Davis." The elderly housekeeper looked up, startled. "Me?" "Yes, you," Melissa confirmed warmly. "You've spent years watching injustice unfold silently around you. But last night, you spoke up, even if just in a whisper. You were the first person to show me kindness. That matters." She turned to the room again. "From this day forward, Loretta will serve on the Employee Ethics Council. She will help shape the training, the hiring, and the leadership standards of this hotel." Loretta's hands trembled slightly as she stood. For the first time in her 30 years of janitorial service, the room looked up to her. "I never wanted a title," she said softly. "I just wanted fairness. And that," Melissa said, "is exactly why you've earned it." The room filled with applause once more, louder this time, richer, freer. Melissa returned to the podium and looked at the crowd with resolve. Every Fairline employee, from executive to intern, will undergo mandatory training on anti-discrimination, unconscious bias, and the ethics of service. But training alone isn't enough. Culture must change. Accountability must live here now. Her tone sharpened. No more dismissive glances. No more gatekeeping respect. No more deciding who looks like they belong. The staff sat straighter. I don't expect perfection. I expect progress. Real, measurable, visible change. And then she said the line she had handwritten and pinned to the bulletin board hours earlier. Don't just train them to serve. Teach them to see the person. A quiet murmur moved through the room. And in that moment, they understood, this wasn't a reaction to a scandal. It was a revolution. The days that followed brought a kind of awakening the Fairline Hotel had never known. What had begun as a night of silent prejudice now became a movement rooted in visibility, voice, and deep reflection. Melissa Warren's message, don't just train them to serve. Teach them to see the person, was printed, framed, and hung behind every service counter, staff entrance, and office wall. But it wasn't just a slogan, it became a standard. A new compass pointing the entire hotel toward decency and equity. Pamela stepped into her new role cautiously but with growing confidence. She shadowed senior leaders during guest interactions, listened to every complaint with open ears, and spearheaded daily reflection huddles with junior staff. Her youth was no longer a barrier, it was an asset. Her bravery had rewritten the rules of rank. Loretta Davis, once the overlooked janitor, now sat at the long mahogany table in every staff strategy meeting, right next to Melissa. She spoke sparingly, but when she did, the room listened. Her observations, years in the making, guided policies that were already producing results. Disciplinary actions once hushed were now transparent. Promotions once reserved for the polished now considered the principled. As for Dylan Evans, he never returned to the hotel. Rowan Hospitality offered him a chance to attend a comprehensive rehabilitation and training program, not out of pity, but in hopes of redemption. He accepted. Quietly. Gratefully. And he started over. Linda Foster, once revered for her efficiency and feared for her coldness, was replaced by a manager known more for her empathy than her resume. But Linda's story didn't end in disgrace. Melissa's final conversation with her had been simple but poignant. You didn't lose your job because of a bad moment, Melissa had told her. You lost it because you let prejudice live in the small moments. Over and over. Linda, deeply moved, sent a handwritten letter weeks later. Thank you for waking me up, it read. I didn't know I was asleep. Tom Reynolds, the stoic security guard, also stepped away. But not in defiance, he requested a reassignment to a mentorship role within the company's private security arm. I want to teach others how to protect without assuming who's a threat, he told William Langston. And Melissa? She remained at the top floor of the Fairline, not as an aloof figurehead, but as a visible, active leader. Every Friday morning, she walked the lobby herself, no matter what she wore. She greeted each staff member by name. She met with guests in sweatshirts as often as she did in suits. She redefined what power looked like. And Charleston noticed. Local press covered the transformation. National outlets called it a hospitality revolution. Civil rights leaders praised Melissa's leadership as a blueprint for what accountability looked like when paired with compassion. One morning, standing by the same window that overlooked the city streets, Melissa saw the reflection of Harold Mitchell in the glass, approaching from behind with his granddaughter, Imani, proudly wearing her new front desk uniform. She's thriving here, Harold said, his voice soft with pride. Melissa turned, smiling warmly. Because she belongs. Harold looked around the hotel, at the smiles, the new energy, the visible change, and nodded. Feels like the place finally sees us now. Melissa agreed. It does. Because now, they're looking with their hearts. Before he left, Harold looked up at the wall by the main lobby. Framed above the concierge desk in gold script was the quote Melissa had left behind. Don't just train them to serve. Teach them to see the person. He read it aloud, and his eyes misted. That, he whispered, should be everywhere. Melissa, standing beside him, felt no need to speak. The change wasn't just complete, it had begun anew. Melissa Warren's journey reminds us that leadership isn't about titles or appearances. It's about standing firm when silence is easiest, and changing hearts when they've hardened with prejudice. Her quiet strength shattered a culture of contempt and rebuilt a place where dignity is non-negotiable. As Melissa said, don't just train them to serve. Teach them to see the person. If this story moved you, let it echo far and wide. Like, share, and subscribe to True Echo for more powerful, inspiring stories where truth meets justice. And tell us in the comments, have you ever seen someone stand up against injustice, and change everything? Thank you for watching. See you in the next story.